Okay, I think we're ready to go, and I am going to remember to record. Okay, now we're ready to go after some technical difficulties. Okay, so good evening, everyone, and welcome. Thank you for joining us again. Um, um, I'm really happy to welcome Jerry Kroth, Dr. Jerry Kroth, back. Jerry has presented for us a couple of times before on his really fascinating work. So I'll just give you a little bio and then throw it over to him. So Jerry Kroth, PhD, is an associate professor emeritus from the Graduate Counseling Psychology program at Santa Clara University here in the Bay Area. His teaching includes psychotherapy and personality theory, dream work, and research methods. He has an abiding therapeutic interest in working with dreams, personal oracles, and the applications of dream theory to psychohistory and collective psychology. He's written numerous books and articles and has been a contributor to Huffington Post and other news outlets, as well as to having presented his work here at FNBR on a few occasions. So, old friend, welcome back, Dr. Kroth. It's very good to see you.
Good to be here. So I'm going to get started right away. Now,
Okey-doke.
if there are any screen problems, you'll have to call me on the phone to somehow let me know.
I will.
So here we go,
Let
ladies and gentlemen. We are getting started with 12,000 BC. Two extinction level events we know nothing about. So by the way, I have a bar across the top of my screen. I hope you don't have that. Anyway, here's the book. I got published this book about 9 months ago, New York Algora Publishers, and this talk is and it's the same title, by the way, 12,000 BC, 2000 extinction level events we know nothing about, and this talk is basically a short overview of that. So we're beginning now with two misconceptions that we all have from our own background and education. First misconception: the Ice Age ended as ice ages end, in a normal, slow, and gradual sequence. Sorry, that's wrong. This is what we were taught, that 14,000 years ago, the ice receded in a gradual manner. 11,000 years ago, 10,000 years ago, 8,000 years ago, and we're working our way towards the present. Okay, and if we go to the future, there won't be any ice. Well, instead, the reality is there were two gigantic cosmic cataclysms that helped put an end to the Ice Age that we never learned about. And that's what this talk is about. The first one was a giant solar storm, like a coronal mass ejection, bigger than anything that ever happened. And the second was a comet sometime later. So we're going to talk about those two cosmic cataclysms in this talk. It changes our understanding of history. But there is another major misconception, okay? The second misunderstanding is this: 35 species of animals went extinct between 12,000 BC and 8,000 BC, due, they say, to climate change and human hunters, okay? The mastodon, the woolly mammoth, the giant sloth, the saber-toothed tiger, the giant armadillo. They said, what we were taught in college, that humans hunted them to death, and that's why they all went extinct, okay? All of it caused by human hunters and climate change. All right, wrong. Not true. The two cosmic cataclysms also wiped out these species far more than human hunters did. Okay, and that's what this talk is really focusing on. Let's take a look at our first misconception. Let's start talking with extinctions, okay?
case, they were,
Oops.
remarkable for their huge sizes.
You can't.
Notable examples include mammoths and mastodons, as in these pictures, as well as on my hat, which I had to wear this hat for this video. Saber-toothed cats, sometimes called saber-toothed tigers, but they're not tigers. They were big cats, but not tigers necessarily. But these guys are also really, popular. Pretty much picture the Ice Age movies, and we've got the megafauna. Giant ground sloths, obviously Sid, of course, but probably a little bigger. Giant ground sloths were freaking huge. Megatherium's the genus name. We'll talk about that later. Giant armadillos, or Glyptodon, again, the genus. These guys are, I think, my favorite. Who knew there were giant armadillos? These are also in Ice Age. I looked that up. They were minor characters. I wish they were bigger. The giant short-faced bears, woolly rhinos, which I think should have been a bigger thing. I didn't even know about woolly rhinos till researching for this video. So let's make that more known. That's like one, adorable, also terrifying, but really cool. And the dire wolves, which I've always known for obviously the Pleistocene.
All right, now I think she's a PhD candidate in biology. At any rate, did all those big animals, they call them megafauna, did they go extinct because of climate and the melting of the ice sheets? That's our first problem. All right, so here are the ice ages. Here's the first one, 400,000 years ago, up, then down. Second one, up, then down. Third one, up, then down. Fourth one, and now up and then down for our present time. Okay, those are the ice ages, and they go in those cycles. The mammoth, the woolly mammoth, was here for 500,000 years. Okay, survived at least 5 ice ages. Why did he suddenly go extinct at the end of the last ice age? If he survived 4 ice ages before, why did he go extinct with this one? It makes no sense. This is the mastodon. He was here for 23 million years. How many ice ages did he live through? He survived all of them. Why did he suddenly go extinct at the end of the last one? Makes no sense that climate change wiped him out. Okay? The saber-toothed tiger, you're not going to believe this, he was on this planet, or she, for 56 million years. How many ice ages did this animal live through? Why did he suddenly go extinct at the end of the last one? Makes no sense that climate change wiped him out. So let's face it, climate change and the end of the ice age did not cause these 35 species to go extinct. It was something else. Okay, so there are more misconceptions and falsehoods. The next one is, well, those, okay, Jerry, those big animals, the megafauna, they went extinct because of humans hunters. Humans hunted them to death. Okay, that's the real reason. Okay, we see pictures all over in our museums, in our anthropology books. Fake news. Take a look at these extinction rates. 82% of the megafauna went extinct in the Americas. 52% went extinct in Northwest Europe. And only 16% went extinct in Africa. How do you explain that? Why the big differences in these extinction rates? I want you to look at this graph. It looks confusing. I'm going to make it unconfusing if I can. In Northwest Europe, human beings, Homo sapiens, were there for 45,000 years, okay? They had 35,000 years to kill off all the megafauna because they're hunting them to death. But they only got 52% of them, all right? Now take a look at the Americas. Humans were in place for 23,000 years. It took them 13,000 years to kill off all the megafauna, and they got 82% of them. The Americans are 5 times bigger than Northwestern Europe, yet they killed them, the megafauna in the Americas, 3 times faster than in Europe. That doesn't make any sense. One more, please. Australasia. Humans were there for 60,000 years. If they were killing off the megafauna, they had 50,000 years to do it, and they got 59% of them. In Africa, we were there for 196,000 years, maybe longer. They had 186,000 years to kill off all the megafauna, but they only got 16% of them. Come on. It makes no sense. It took 50,000 years to kill 59% of the megafauna in Australasia, but in 186,000 years, they could only kill off 16%. I'm sorry. That makes no sense, and that is nonsense, and that's what they've been teaching. All right. Wait a minute. I have to, I screwed up my slide there. Excuse me. Coming right back to my little slide. Come on, slide. Human hunters killed off some large animals. Yes, they did. But something else was going on. I think we got 2 more participants or something while I'm doing this, so I don't know how to get rid of that screen. If you can help me turn off that screen, that would be real nice. I don't know how to do that. Mute all, invite. Oh, I'm going to invite these people. I guess that's what I'm supposed to be doing.
No, they're already here.
Oh, they're all here. Then how do I get rid of that screen? There we go. So here's Graham Hancock talking about this issue. Let us be clear. The idea that 35 species went extinct because of climate change and because humans hunted them into extinctions is false. It is just not true.
What would cause a mass die-out? Not human hunting. I'm strongly opposed to what they call the overkill hypothesis. This is one of the alternative explanations for why the megafauna went extinct at that time.
Right.
Is that hunter-gatherers literally wiped out all the megafauna. And to me, that for a couple of reasons, that doesn't make sense. It doesn't make sense, first of all, because hunter-gatherers we know in the world today do not wipe out their prey animals. They live in coexistence with them. They live in balance with them. They don't just destroy them all. It's our kind of culture that destroys animals.
Right, like what we did with the bison.
What we did with the bison.
Yeah.
And therefore it seems very un-hunter-gatherer-like activity to completely destroy the megafauna. And the other thing is the simultaneous extinction of large numbers of creatures, that it's happening very, very, very quickly, suggests to me that we're looking at a disaster of some sort. And that's why the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis, which is solid science, although undoubtedly disputed, which suggests that multiple fragments of a disintegrating comet hit the Earth 12,800 years ago.
Now, this is another writer, Randall Carlson.
Here's the interesting question. We can see from the number one, species loss is going to be directly related to habitat loss. The greater the loss of habitat, the greater it will affect species that are adapted to living in that habitat. So you can conclude from that if 3/4 of the species of North and South America went extinct, that was where the greatest habitat loss occurred. So it was the last global catastrophe was kind of focused on the Western Hemisphere. Eurasia was second, Africa was third. So what that tells you is the safest place to have been on Earth during these events would have been Africa. And I suspect that it all pretty much is around Kenya,
Tanzania.
Tanzania, that's what I'm trying to say, thank you. Around the Great Rift area.
Okay.
That's where it seems like was kind of a place of global refuge. You had the greatest survival of species, and once the dust settled in the aftermath of these events, they were able to repopulate.
Now, so let's take a look at our 2 misconceptions. The first was that the megafauna extinctions were caused by climate change. Untrue. The second was that the extinctions were caused by human overkill. Not true. So there's still one more misconception. The ending of the Ice Age was a gradual cyclic event that is part of the planet's normal process. Okay. But instead, this book that I'm talking about, and it's not just an original idea of mine, is that gigantic catastrophes happened during this period. It was either a comet it was either that or it was a solar storm called a Miyake event, or less. Another possibility, not a lot of evidence for it, but a supernova explosion hit Earth. Or it was a combination of these things. Now watch carefully. We're going to learn about the Younger Dryas, and that what you're looking at here is very critical for this entire thesis. That's the temperature of Greenland for 20,000 years, okay? And I want to show you what the Younger Dryas is and what the Bowling-Allerod period is. This is very critical to our discussion. Watch carefully. Right here, at 12,000 BC, temperature shoots up in Greenland 25 degrees. Boom. And then something happens and it cools down, go all the way back to the Ice Ages levels. And then once again, in 12,000 BC, in 12, I'm sorry, I get my dates messed up. This second boundary, there's another event at 12,800 years before the present, where it shoots up again, 25 degrees, 25 degrees. Bowling-Allerod, that's what that period is called. The Younger Dryas is what this period is called. And that is, now we see the end of the Ice Age and the temperature is coming way up high. All right. So the misconception is that the ending of the Ice Age was a gradual cyclic event that is part of the planet's normal process. Sorry, it was not gradual. It was abrupt, two abrupt catastrophic changes. What caused these two massive changes? Well, we'll start at the beginning. The first one is a solar storm, unprecedented in human history. It's called a Miyake event because it was named after a physicist whose name is Miyake. Okay, a solar storm of such magnitude. I don't know if you've heard of the Carrington event of 1859, but there was a solar storm in 1850. This was like 10 times bigger. If a Carrington event happened now, it would wipe out all global internet communication, cost at least $7 trillion in damage. This storm is at least 10 times bigger. That happened back then. This is a giant solar storm that hit Earth, and there was nothing prior to that. There were little smaller ones, which we'll see in a second, nothing this big.
By analyzing ancient tree rings found in the southern French Alps, an international team of scientists has revealed a huge spike in radiocarbon levels 14,300 years ago. The radiocarbon spike was caused by a massive solar storm, known as a Miyake event. This is the 9th such event to have been identified, and the largest so far. Miyake events are named after the Japanese physicist Fusa Miyake, who, along with colleagues, identified the first 3 of them in 2012. They're extreme solar events, including solar flares and coronal mass ejections, that unleash short-term bursts of energetic particles into space. Upon arrival at Earth, these cause sudden surges in radiocarbon production in the upper atmosphere, a record of which is then preserved in tree rings over the course of a single year as the radiocarbon makes its way to ground level and is absorbed by living things. The most recent confirmed Miyake events occurred more than 1,000 years ago in 774 AD and 993 AD. This newly identified 14,300-year-old storm is, however, the largest that has ever been found, roughly twice the size of the 2 most recent ones. 9 such extreme solar storms have now been identified as having occurred over the last 15.
Now, she found a fossilized tree in France, counted the rings, looked at the radiocarbon distribution, and that is how she came to that conclusion.
But it looks like now we have a new extreme, the oldest and the most powerful Miyake event ever found. Once again using dendrochronology, but this time by looking at various ancient trees across France. And it looks like this event happened 14,300 years ago, and compared to previous ones, was even more extreme with at least twice as much power. Or basically it produced a peak that was at least twice as high. And just like before, it's something that seems to have changed the atmosphere of the planet for approximately 1 year. But in terms of potential power, being anywhere from 50 to maybe even 100 times more powerful than the famous Carrington event, once again resulting in a spike of carbon-14, beryllium-10, and chlorine-30.
Okay, so there's more evidence that I like to bring to bear, because remember, this is not accepted by contemporary archaeology and anthropology yet. But there's the science, the hard science from peer-reviewed journals is very clear. New Scientist, professor of natural sciences, Robert Schoch, a climatologist. His allegation is that the solar flare was the cause of the Pleistocene mass extinction. That's how those animals died out. It burned up their habitat. I would like to read this to you. This is from him, I think. Plasma hitting the surface of the Earth could heat and fuse rock, incinerate flammable materials, melt ice caps, vaporize shallow bodies of water, creating an extended deluge of rain, and send the climate into a warming spell, 25 degrees. The release of pressure that follows the melting of thousands of meters thick ice sheets can induce earthquakes and even cause hot rock under pressure to melt and erupt to the surface as volcanoes. The world, in other words, was in chaos. So the shock of the Miyake event begins the process of extinction. I'd like to read this, but part of that is obscured by our things. This is from a science journal, and it says that the final termination of the Pleistocene megafauna and several genera of mammals and birds was caused by this event. Okay. Science News.
Of energetic particles from solar flares and coronal mass ejections from the sun must also be taken into account. Notably, historical records reveal spikes in solar energetic particles, with the first identified spike occurring in 774 AD, causing a rapid increase in carbon-14 over a single year. This event has been corroborated by measurements in various trees and corresponding data from other cosmogenic isotopes found in polar ice cores. Subsequent spikes were recorded in 993 AD, 5259 BC, and 7176 BC. Until recently, this was the most significant spike identified. Now, a team have found evidence in fossilized trees in the French Alps dating to around 14,300 years ago, which is almost double the previous spike. It is so large that it would have crippled modern civilization. This event featured an abrupt rise followed by a gradual decay.
Okay, so the solar flare was at least twice the size of anything previously recorded. And this science is very good science, okay? And it's coming from, not from social science, but from hard peer-reviewed science journals. Now, it is at least 10 times greater than the Carrington event. That is almost impossible to conceptualize. So here's the Miyake event, and it's followed by soot and blocking of the sun's rays and a plunge in the Earth's temperature. And then we have a second event, a comet in 12,800 years before the present, that begins another 25 degree shoot up, another spike. So two cataclysmic events. Now, Isaac Newton believed that a comet hit Earth. He couldn't prove it, but he had his suspicions. So the evidence for this is found in when there's a extraterrestrial event, there's certain residue, microspherules, mullite, iridium, platinum, nanodiamonds. Those things have been found on 3 continents. We conclusively have identified a thin layer on 3 continents, particularly, now this is from a physics journal I'm reading, particularly in North America and Western Europe, that contain a rich assemblage of nanodiamonds, the production of which can only be explained by cosmic impact. Okay, we're not talking about conspiracy theory here or that kind of stuff that you see on YouTube. We're talking here about very, very recent physics and chemistry. So what happens is huge fires, soot, volcanoes blocking the sun, and a layer called the black mat that is containing all of these things. You see that black line? That black line is the historic layer of those elements, soot and microspherules, across 3 continents, not on Africa. Now, why do we have exact dates? Because we do have very, very precise carbon dates on these 2 events. So this is YDIH, the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis.
Was so massive. So what is our evidence for the YDIH or the impact at the Younger Dryas boundary? Well, we do see an increased amount of iridium or kind of iridium spike in the rock record of some sections that mark the Younger Dryas boundary around 12.9 thousand years ago when the Younger Dryas began. And why do we care about iridium? Well, iridium is more common in extraterrestrial objects than on Earth. So when we see spikes of it, for example, we see this globally throughout Earth at the KPG boundary. When we see those things, we know that, or at least it hints at some sort of extraterrestrial source rather than Earth source. We do see some spikes of iridium in the Younger Dryas sections or some of the layers of rock around.
All right, so now I want to introduce you to that evidence, by the way, is pretty sound. This is Jimmy Corsetti. He appears on YouTube, and I want to sort of illustrate some of the craziness about this subject.
Oh, I guess I'll just go ahead and jump into that right now. But first, you may have seen the recent headlines in the news regarding the NASA discovery of a massive 19-mile wide crater found hidden underneath Greenland's Hiawatha Glacier. This crater is a result of an asteroid impact from a nearly 1 mile wide mountain of iron weighing somewhere around, get this, 11 to 12 billion tons, and was traveling at approximately 12 miles per second, which is equivalent to more than 43,000 miles per hour when it slammed into the Earth some 12,000 years ago, and with the mind-boggling force of essentially a 700 megaton bomb. And without a doubt, this is the reason why there is so much mystery and why we know so little about lost ancient human civilization.
Okay.
As this event was so extreme that whatever existing civilizations were around at that time faced a massive reset button, sending them essentially back to the Stone Age and erasing so much of ancient history.
So that's Jimmy's point of view, that this comet hit Greenland, created that explosion, and it destroyed advanced human civilizations that were already existing, like Atlantis. Trouble is, when I investigated all this, you know, when I started this, I wrote to a professor of anthropology at UCLA, and I said, can you give me a good book, a good link to advanced human societies that existed before the Ice Age or during the Ice Age? And he wrote back and said, there were none. Okay, just, and I read the book that he recommended, and there were none, it said. So Jimmy has a master's in literature. The Hiawatha crater was not created 12,000 years ago. It was created 23 million years ago, or 53 million years ago. Others argue that it wasn't that comet. It was a comet that broke up into many, many fragments that hit Northern Europe and the western part of the Western Hemisphere. So the size of the comet, the speed, where it hit is not entirely known, except that it's thought to be in North America. So after that cometary impact, here we have some extinction.
Completely alien. For example, in my home state of Arizona, car-sized armadillo-like creatures known as glyptodons roamed the landscape, which was largely dense forest rather than the dry desert seen today. Other unusual creatures included the giant ground sloth, which stood at 9 feet tall, elephant-like woolly mammoths, and a very large species of lion known as the American lion. So, why are these megafauna no longer around today? The answer is that these creatures were killed by one of the planet's most recent mass extinction events, which was caused by a massive comet impact, the likes of which have not been seen in modern times. This impact event created a devastating impact winter known as the Younger Dryas.
So there's also a comet research group made up of over 50 some university professors
around on the idea that the Earth was hit by a comet or series of comets that altered the course of life on Earth forever. The Comet Research Group is a team of 63 scientists from 55 universities who are studying the Younger Dryas impact theory. This team has been publishing their findings and challenging critics with their own findings. The Comet Research Group believes that fragments of the comet in the Taurus meteor stream impacted Earth in the northern hemisphere. This is a map of the areas where the group has proposed the impact field is. This would explain why North America lost nearly 90% of its megafauna, and Africa barely lost any of their megafauna species. One of the most compelling pieces of evidence supporting the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis is the discovery of a distinctive layer of sediment known as black mat. Found at various sites across the world, this dark organic-rich layer contains high concentrations of microsols, nanodiamonds, and other impact-related materials.
Okay, so that's your impact field. That's the event. Africa is spared. Now, there's more evidence. Can you see the Great Lakes at your lower right? Well, above that is Lake Agassiz, which was the largest known lake in the world. And what happens now, it was hard for me to piece together. Well, this is not all, one piece of information that's well known. You have to piece these events together. And no, I don't know if I've ever met anyone who can say this is exactly the sequence of events. But here's one sequence that makes sense, okay? First, after the comet hits, Lake Agassiz overflows or is melted. That causes Lake Missoula to overflow. And that causes two bodies of water, the equivalent of Lake Erie and Lake Ontario, emptying in a matter of just a few hours. The greatest mega flood on Earth.
This is the story of how the greatest flood of all time could carve out a landscape in the blink of an eye. Washington State, in the northwest corner of the United States. After miles and miles of peaceful, flat farmland, suddenly, out of nowhere, the scablands erupt. Gorges, some almost 1,000 feet deep. A waterfall that dwarfs Niagara Falls, but has no water. Weird holes in the valley floors. Strange layered deposits. And over the whole area, boulders are scattered as if a giant had dropped them there. The Scablands. Few places on Earth have stirred such mystery and controversy, and it lies just 200 miles east of Seattle. For almost a century, scientists have been struggling to discover what forces could have shaped this landscape. But try as they might, for decades they were unable to explain it.
How did that rock get there? So as we put this piece together, the comet strikes, Lake Agassiz empties, Lake Missoula empties, the scablands are carved out, and extinctions follow along with erratics. Erratics are large boulders that don't belong there that are taken in a megaflood and dumped elsewhere.
Leaving a gaping hole a mile wide through which an ocean of lake water erupted.
You would have heard this tremendous roar coming long before you saw anything. The earth would have shook.
Imagine the loudest noise you've ever heard. Multiply that by 1,000 times.
The sheer speed and volume of this incredible mass of water churned up these huge ripples and left behind watermarks as the only remaining record of its vast size. This one cataclysmic event sent trillions of gallons of water at ferocious speeds towards an unsuspecting scablands. Could this giant single body of water really have created the extraordinary features in the scablands?
Watch, very good science coming.
This rushing mass of water create canyons, which look like they were eroded over millions of years. Like this one, 20 times the size of Niagara Falls, known as dry falls. How could it carry all these erratics, which are normally deposited by glaciers over thousands of years? And how could it carve out all these strange potholes, which are like those in the bed of a river, but on a monumental scale? To test whether a single body of water from Lake Missoula could really have done this, scientists have built their own mini scablands.
Very interesting and very clever.
The surface dynamics team at St. Anthony Falls Laboratory constructed a scale model of the scablands and then poured water over it to represent the failure of glacial Lake Missoula. Here it comes. What quickly becomes visible is the way in which the water does not just disperse over a wide area. It gouges out these channels, which are then quickly eroded by the rushing water into extraordinary shapes. It is only when the water is turned on that the significance of these shapes becomes clear.
They reproduced it.
For years, scientists argued that the features of
All right, so
flood basalts causing house-sized boulders to be carried with the flood. As these floods overtopped cliffs, some of these boulders became permanently in place there. Continuing onwards, the flood entered an area of Washington now referred to as the Channel Scablands. It subsequently towered over a bend in the Columbia River, depositing an abundance of sediment and creating giant ripples in the landscape which are similar to those seen in a shallow sea today, except they were each 250 feet wide. Elsewhere, mounds of gravel the size of skyscrapers were deposited, leaving behind an abundance of these unique features.
all right, so the final point that I'd like to make here is about erratics. Those rocks were not deposited by glaciers, but by megafloods.
Being transported in a glacier itself. Much more likely that what you had was a major flood through here carrying icebergs, and on many of these icebergs was this metachlorite rock that came from the Mount Robeson, Mount Edith Cavell area up near Jasper Park. And another thing that clearly to me makes the case for massive floods through here is that south of here, just this side of the border with Montana, there's a field of gigantic current ripples. that is clearly an indication of major meltwater flood.
All right, one last geologist, and then we're going to go on to another topic.
Near Mattawa, Washington. Erratic boulders that do not match the local bedrock. The local bedrock here in central Washington is brown, layers of basalt, lava rock, and yet we've got these big light-colored boulders, granites and metamorphic rocks that dot the landscape. How did they get here? Erratics are usually associated with glaciers, ice sheets, bringing these boulders to an area. But here at Mattawa, we are 60 miles south of where the ice sheet used to be in north central Washington, north of Wenatchee. So this is not from glacial activity. This is from ice age floods, ripping off pieces of that ice sheet and carrying.
All right, so the mega flood carries these erratics and deposits them, all caused by a comet hitting the northern hemisphere. Now that is a fragment of one of the fragments. It's the largest meteorite known, I believe, in the world, and it's from Washington State. Those are two kids sitting in it. Imagine all those fragments hitting the northern hemisphere. And that's called the Willamette meteorite in Washington State. All right, so you're getting the picture now that, but there's one final piece of evidence I want to bring to you, that this event is what caused all those extinctions, or most of them. These are bone beds in Ukraine, in Texas, in Nebraska. These are beds 2 feet thick of just bones, not skeletons, just dismembered animals of all sorts, mastodons, lions, whatever, all together, like they were carried in the flood, totally dismembered and deposited at the end of the whatever this flood water was. There's another one. So there's the evidence for our extinction. So our first major conclusion are there were two major cataclysms in recent history. The first was a massive solar storm, a Miyake event, 12,300 BC, and another, or 14,000 years ago, and the other, a comet that hit Earth 12,800 years ago. Those events caused huge temperature changes, massive fires, mega floods, and the mass extinction of 35 megafauna. Now, all of this scientific evidence I'm citing to you was only known in the last 15 years. Okay, we didn't know this before that. So again, we have a massive spike because of the solar storm. We have fires and soot and a cooling. Hold on, I've got to turn off my phone. We have a comet striking the Earth at this period of time, and two catastrophic events that gave rise to those mass extinctions. That's our first conclusion. Now, I'm going to get us a little stranger for the FMBR audience, so get ready because it's going to get a little weirder now. So what's the impact on the human race? Did humans experience an extinction event too? Were there advanced human societies wiped out by these cataclysms, as Jimmy says? And the leading candidates for advanced societies are Göbekli Tepe in Turkey, Gulang Padang in Indonesia, Yonaguni in Japan, and Atlantis. Those are our leading candidates. I can't cover them all in this lecture. I don't have enough time. So the first question is, did humans perish during this time? We're talking about between 12,000 BC and 9,000 BC. Okay. So archaeology versus cellular biology. Certainly, one piece of evidence is that the Clovis people were wiped out. These are people who were hunter-gatherers who settled from Siberia, came to North America, settled in Florida all the way down into South America, completely wiped out. Those are their settlements. All right. There are pictures or drawings of the hunter-gatherer nature of these people. Now, this isn't, I'm reading this from a journal in addition to discovering Clovis people in South America, they also found that these people disappeared from the continent about 9,000 years ago and were replaced by people with different genetic ancestry. We don't know why this happened, but the insight means archaeologists are still investigating. Well, we do know why this happened. They got wiped out by the comet. Now, take a look at archaeology and anthropology are opposed to this so far. How many authors do you see in this study? What, 15? The comprehensive refutation of the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. It's not the cause of anything. And so they have their articles that they're kind of refuting this whole theory. Yeah, I'm a psychologist. We call that denial. All right. Here's an article from Cellular Biology about the human Y chromosome disappearing. Sorry, the genetic changes are happening. It's got another 15 authors. I wrote to one of the authors because the article says there were huge genetic changes. We lost a number of lineages, a substantial loss of lineages during this time, and a profound genomic impact. So I wrote to one of a lady who was one of the authors. I said, can you estimate how many humans died? What percentage of the human race was wiped out? And she wrote back and said, I can't go beyond my data. I can't tell you. All I can tell you is that a lot of people were wiped out and there was a genomic impact, but I can't tell you, was it 10%, 40% of the human race? We don't know. We can't say that. So yes, human population was reduced significantly, not because they ran out of prey to kill, but because they felt the impacts of these cosmic cataclysms, just like the megafauna did. So second question is more intriguing. Was there an advanced human civilization that was wiped out during the Younger Dryas period? Joe Rogan, Graham Hancock, they're always speculating. Yeah, well, blah, 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 okay? And I tried to look at that objectively as much. Let's take a look at Göbekli. I look at these 4 instances, and I'm only going to cover one here, Göbekli Tepe. Here's Jimmy again.
Believable. Now, let me first say that I imagine by now that we are all familiar with the truly extraordinary site of Göbekli Tepe located in Turkey. Dated at approximately 11,600 years old, it is by far the oldest megalithic site found anywhere on Earth. In fact, it's nearly 7,000 years older than the already mysterious site of Stonehenge. And not only that, Göbekli Tepe is a whopping 50 times larger than Stonehenge itself, as it covers an area of approximately 22 acres. In fact, to put its size into perspective.
All right, so Göbekli Tepe really does exist, and it's only been partially discovered, and it is huge, and it's older than the pyramids and older than Stonehenge, yes. But when I was looking at it, I know there's some geometric organization, some sense of mathematics, maybe in this area, but their tools are stone tools. There was no written language that I could see. It was inhabited between 9,500 and 8,000 BC. So there's no proof that it existed before the Younger Dryas or before 12,000 BC. It's just conjecture. Best conclusion, no proof it existed that before that time. It was fundamentally a hunter-gatherer society that used stone tools. One guy wrote a book called A Stone Age Sanctuary in Southeastern Anatolia, and I agree with that. I do not think this was an advanced society that existed 15, 17, 20,000 years ago. Sorry, close but no cigar. So were there any advanced human societies before the Younger Dryas? Or to say it another way, were there any advanced human societies before the ice melted? And I think the answer, if you're being objective with all of these that I review in the book, is unfortunately no. There was a lady there that had a sourpuss expression, but I lost that. So I want to give you a couple final thoughts before we quit. This now, what we've done is pretty much peer-reviewed science, but I want to add now a bit of speculation to this, and I hope the people at FMBR will find this acceptable. This is just a hypothesis, some evidence for it, but you're going to think I'm a bit strange in proposing this, but I'm going to propose it anyway. Here it is. Look at that skull is an anatomically modern human being, a Homo sapien, 233,000 years old. Okay, the oldest Homo sapien skull, you could have mated with that individual. We were taught in high school, Homo sapiens started about 50,000 years ago. Then it was 90, then it was 120, 193. Now it's 233,000 years. Look at this timeline. That's 233,000 years that human beings were on this planet. Homo sapiens with the same cerebellum you have. This is Göbekli Tepe. Oh my God, we didn't lose that. Fine. This is Göbekli Tepe. This is Sumeria, the first really advanced human culture that invented the wheel, multi-story buildings, prostitution, smelting. This is Egypt. This is the first written language. You can't see that. There it is. So let's say all recorded advanced human societies cover about 8,000 years. All right. That represents basically the 96th percentile of our existence on this planet. We got very smart very quickly. Okay. That even regular anthropologists admit that there's something peculiar about that. So it took us 221,000 years before we domesticated a goat. Give me a break. 222,000 years before we started growing wheat. It took 224,000 years before we got the idea of domesticating a pig. Why? It took 227,000 years before we got the idea of domesticating horses.
For a while now, people have argued as to when humans began to domesticate wild horses. Better yet, many historians to this day argue about what time period the first horseback riders came from and what their reasoning behind learning to do so was. As of right now, there are two different arguments, both of which claim that riding on horseback became more common more than 4,000 years ago.
Why didn't Neanderthal ride a horse? At any rate, we were definitely late bloomers. It takes us 227,000 years on this planet before we develop a written language. That's hieroglyphs and cuneiform. Why were we so slow? And I would like to make a proposal to you, which is speculative, but I think I got some interesting evidence to support it. Traditional archaeology says, oh, no, what happened was this. The ice melted, then agriculture started, and people got sedentary, and they organized themselves in villages, and then they started writing poetry and making musical instruments and making trigonometry and stuff. And it all happened because of the ice ages. Well, if you look at the planet during the maximum of the ice age, that's what it looked like. Look at the areas that are green, okay? Human beings were here for thousands of years. Why didn't they grow anything? In South America, in Latin America, in Southern Africa, in Indonesia. Chimpanzees were here. They were here for 5 million years. They were eating figs. Why weren't human beings growing anything? Why were they so nomadic? What happened to their intelligence? Humans were in China 60,000 years ago. Australia 50,000 years ago. No agriculture. Why? Why were we so slow with any cognitive development? So there are possibilities. Carl Sagan wrote a book on biology, by the way. He's an astronomer. He said it takes 150,000 years for a chimpanzee big toe to turn and to morph into a human big toe. Genetic evolutionary changes are very slow. How come we grew so intelligent so quickly and so rapidly? Well, there's some kind of genetic mutations that occurred. Was it an internal mutation that made us so smart, or was it external intervention? So I'm going for external intervention. So stay with me for 2 more minutes. Okay, so watch. There are very recent genetic changes that have been related to intelligence that have been discovered. One is called ASPM and the other is HAR. They're not over 70,000 years, only 5 to 10,000 years ago, these things happened. We, human beings, have engineered mice to become smarter. We put in a human gene, one and a FOX2, into a mouse to make the mouse smarter. And we have made engineered mice smarter. The question is, what if that was done to us? What if someone or some extraterrestrial presence altered the human genome to make us exponentially smarter than we were for 227,000 years? Well, that's an interesting hypothesis, which will knock your socks off if you read the part of the book that covers it. But there, can I just give you one piece of what I call, what is the word I'm looking for? Circumstantial evidence. It's not strong evidence. Okay, there's a lot of books, human books, that talk about the gods. The Book of Enoch, the Indian Mahabharata, the Egyptian pyramid texts, Persian Enuma Elish, the Mayan Popol Vuh, Japanese Kajoki, the 5 heavenly emperors in China. Ancient literature says that Sumerians did not invent smelting. The gods came and taught them smelting. And there's a whole body of literature, cross-cultural, that talks about the gods. So you'll have to read that in the book because I don't want to cover it further, but I think it's very fascinating. Now, I'd like to make one last comment before we quit. If you graduated college in 2015 or earlier, you never heard of any of this stuff that I just talked to you about. None. Okay? This is all new. Everything that you've heard today is basically new. Archaeology and anthropology are still very much opposed to this. But what we cited here is hard scientists, nuclear chemists, oceanographers. Miyake is a solar physicist. She's not an anthropologist. Nuclear physicists, natural scientists, cellular biologists, geoscientists, and climatologists. These are the people I cited for this talk. Okay? Our archaeology and anthropology are lagging behind. Okay? We have the comet impact scientists who are working. So that's the story. And it's new, and I'm very glad that you watched it and stayed here. And so that's the end of my talk, actually.
The girls.
I'm having a hard time unmuting myself. Here we go. Okay. Is that coming from you?
No, I'm all done.
Okay. So I want to encourage people, if they have questions, to go ahead and type them in the chat or the Q&A. And if you want to talk with Dr. Kroth directly, you can raise your hand and I'll unmute you. I have, you touched on this. One of the questions I had is, how long, because I was thinking, why don't people know this, right? And you said this is all very new. How long do you think that it takes to change academic minds, to change the canon? How much data will it take for the story to change?
It's starting, there, like in the last month, there have been 3 or 4 articles that are appearing. It's getting to be more and more accepted. I don't know if it's making it into anthropology textbooks yet, but, and remember, there's always this ever-present YouTube conspiracy thing going on, which discourages serious academics from making these statements, because there's Jimmy there telling us that the whole idea of Atlantis, it's a wonderful story, but the evidence that Atlantis existed, it's extremely weak. I mean, there's just a few scattered pieces of empirical evidence that it's anything other than a myth. So I think give it another 20 years, and I think it'll be more acceptable.
I think that's that's been the case. Don't you think it'll be faster though with all of this? I mean, things are happening faster. I'm just hoping it'll be faster, but we'll see. I mean, 20 years in academia is pretty fast. Come to think of
Well,
it.
you know that girl who made the woman who made the thing of the talking about the extinction of the megafauna.
Mhm.
I wrote to her, and she was quite cynical about the Younger Dryas impact hypothesis. She's made it part of her presentation, but she doesn't believe it. So and she's a brand new PhD. So I think there's a way to go before we get there.
Well, that's interesting because I thought this was pretty compelling. But and so you mentioned that there was that paper with the 15 authors that refute the whole thing, right? What are the main refutations to this?
Well, they said there were volcanoes on Earth that exploded and that didn't, and that's where the black mat came from. It wasn't necessarily a comet, and so there was a period of volcanic activity like Krakatoa. So we don't think it was a comet. So they dispute the microspheral nanodiamonds data, and they think that it's poppycock, and they don't think that's the reason for the extinction. Those bone beds that I showed you, they think those bone beds were caused by human hunters, taking the mastodon apart and having a barbecue and just leaving the bones in a pile.
Wow.
Rather than having them destroyed in a mega flood.
You mentioned
That's basically
Robert Schoch. Isn't he the one who proposed originally the erosion theory at Giza with the
I don't know that much about him, but I like what he has said about this. But it sounds like he would be there.
He's a geologist, isn't he?
He's a climatologist, I believe.
Okay. Yeah, that was the first time I heard the theory, because looking at erosion patterns at the Sphinx, under the Sphinx, that it was consistent with a very large amount of water, rushing by, like you demonstrated in that video.
Right.
That was really interesting. So Sue wants to know, why would aliens even want us to advance so much faster? What's their interest? In your speculation, what would be the interest?
We're the children of the gods. That's my pet theory, that we were that they came down and they saw Neanderthal and a few other species of Homo erectus and so forth, and that they decided to have a genetic experiment, and we're the result of that. And all of our religious texts, believe it or not, our Father who art in heaven, our progenitor is not of this earth. So, I mean, we have a lot of testimony in ancient literature, which we all consider superstitious, that say the aliens came. Osiris, was not from this earth. He came from another place. And
Even
the
Genesis.
Gilgamesh, the Song of Gilgamesh, they're all kind of commemorating the aliens who came here and taught us things, and they're protective, and they're our progenitors. So that's the hypothesis I pursue.
I mean, I kind of like it.
I kind of like it too.
So I'm gonna ask you to speculate some more, just for fun, because this is all, there's a lot of this in the news about new objects appearing in our solar system, right? Like, is it the 3D Atlas?
Yeah, I thought it was a comet, but I saw whoever this Japanese physicist is, he presents some very interesting data that it's not behaving the way a comet should behave.
Exactly.
It's hollow.
Isn't that?
It's not. I don't know. I'm not that up with the science, but Avi Loeb in Harvard is getting a reputation as being a bit of a kook. But if you listen to what he says, he's saying his measurements do not tally with the existence of a comet traveling through, the gravitational pull, the movement.
And the composition, right? That it's
Yeah.
a lot of nickel in it. Yeah, so it's who knows? Maybe
But they're
someone.
going, they're not coming to see us.
Yeah, yeah. Yeah, interesting. So
one last argument, if the idea that the aliens planted some intelligent genes in our genome, and they may have made a few mistakes because we're ruining the planet.
Mhm.
In just 8,000 years, we're not behaving the way other species behaved. Anyway, that's all from
Well,
me.
I think that's what one of the points you made about the hunter-gatherer kind of, over hunting hypothesis is that, what we know of previous civilizations, of hunter-gatherer civilizations, is that they work in harmony, right? They work to
Yes,
maintain a balance, like you said.
and we're out of balance.
Exactly. And maybe they could have gotten that out of balance, but it seems unlikely.
Do you know about the Zimbabwe UFO incident?
No.
So there was 62 children in Zimbabwe in a little upscale school saw a UFO land, and they gathered around the UFO, and it's a very interesting story. And many of them felt that they were hypnotized, and they were 11 years old. And what the alien, who looked like an alien, like out of a Time magazine, he said, "There's too much technology. You're ruining the Earth." That's what he said to the 11-year-olds. It's an interesting story. Check it out. There are a couple very interesting witnesses there.
Well, I mean, we're living in very interesting times, and it feels like very accelerated times, right?
Yes.
We're getting a lot of information very quickly. So let me ask you, I'm going to ask you one closing questions, because I'm not getting a lot of questions from people. Maybe they're just digesting this. And this might be outside of your purview, but I'm just going to ask you, how are you staying grounded? How are you coping with this kind of perceived acceleration in consciousness, in our awareness, I'm going to say transformative times?
I'm personally, I mean, I'm sure that was a very serious question, but I was just thinking, my Zoom, you and I were trying to do Zoom. It was upgraded. We could barely get the thing on. My telephone went down. Siri won't talk to me anymore. My video program that I use got upgraded, and I lost a function. My CarPlay in my Chevrolet stopped because they upgraded. It's like, how do you keep up with all of the technology? It's getting to be dizzying.
Mhm.
But I love AI Google searches. They're so wonderful. They're lovely. But I think it's causing some stress. I keep thinking it's related to my age, but I'm glad you're younger and it bothers you
I was
too.
going to say, it's not just that. It's not just that. But yeah. So let me ask you to tell people where they can get a hold of you, or where they can get your book. You have a website.
Yes, collectivepsych.com.
What is it?
Collective Psych, one word, no space. Collective Psych, PSYCH.com. That's my website. All my books and videos are there.
Okay, very good.
Thank you so much for inviting me.
Yeah, I thank you so much for presenting this. A lot to think. I think it's going to stay with me for a while, and I'll absolutely get the book. So thank you, everyone else, for joining us, and we will see you next time.
Okay, thank you, Julie.